Part 1. The Last Expedition. February 1959. The northern Ural Mountains were silent. No birds. No wind. Only endless white snow stretching beyond the horizon. 9 experienced hikers set out on what was supposed to be a challenging but routine expedition. They were young, strong, confident. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an experienced mountaineer, a calm and calculated planner. This trip was meant to earn them the highest level of Soviet hiking certification. It was not supposed to become one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. The group consisted of engineering students, athletic, disciplined, used to extreme conditions. They carried cameras, journals, carefully packed equipment. They documented everything. Photos from the early days show smiling faces, laughter, snowball fights, footprints in fresh powder. Nothing felt dangerous. Nothing felt wrong. On January 28th, one member turned back due to illness. 8 continued forward with Igor. That decision would later save one life. The remaining hikers pushed deeper into the mountains. The temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. The wind became sharper. The terrain more hostile. Still, they moved forward. On February 1st, they made a critical decision. Instead of descending to a forested valley for shelter, they camped on the exposed slope of a mountain known as Kholat Syakh. In the local Mansi language, the name means Mountain of the Dead. At the time, it probably sounded dramatic, but no one imagined how literal it would become. They set up their large canvas tent on the open snow. No trees. No protection. Just white emptiness around them. They had done this before. They trusted their skills. That night, something happened. Something powerful enough to make 9 experienced hikers do the unthinkable. Investigators would later find the tent ripped open. From the inside, the hikers had cut their way out. Barefoot. Some wearing only socks. Some wearing almost nothing at all. In -30 degrees. They did not exit through the door. They slashed through the fabric in panic. The search begins. Days passed. Then weeks. The Dyatlov group was expected to send a telegram as soon as they reached their final destination. No message ever came. At first, no one panicked. Winter expeditions often ran late. Storms could delay progress. But as February turned toward mid-month, families began to worry. By February 20th, search teams were organized. Students, volunteers, military personnel. Even aircraft scanned the frozen wilderness from above. The northern Urals showed no mercy. Blizzards erased tracks. Snow buried clues. Visibility changed by the hour. Then, on February 26th, searchers spotted something strange on the slope of Kholat Syakh. A partially collapsed tent, half buried in snow. At first glance, it looked abandoned. But as they approached, they realized something was terribly wrong. The tent was still standing in part. Supplies were inside. Boots, coats, food, camera equipment. Everything they would have needed to survive. Still there. Untouched. The stove had not been set up properly. It looked like they had been preparing for the night. Then investigators noticed the cuts. The canvas had been slashed open from the inside. Multiple knife cuts. Clean. Deliberate. Not torn by wind. Not shredded by an animal. Cut from within. As if something inside the tent had been more frightening than the deadly cold outside. Footprints were visible leading down toward the forest. 8 or 9 sets. Some barefoot. Some in socks. Some wearing just one shoe. They did not appear chaotic. No signs of a wild stampede. It looked like they walked. Calmly. Side by side. The footprints stretched nearly 1 mile toward a patch of trees. That distance, in minus 30 degrees Celsius, without proper clothing, was a death sentence. The first bodies were found near a cedar tree. 2 of the hikers. Wearing only underwear. No shoes. Their hands were burned. The bark of the tree above them was broken. Up to several meters high. It looked as if they had climbed it. Trying to see something. Or trying to escape something. Between the cedar tree and the tent, another body was found. Face down in the snow. As if crawling back. Toward the tent. Toward safety. But he never made it. In the following days, 3 more bodies were discovered. Spread between the forest and the campsite. All positioned as if they were trying to return. Trying to go back to the tent. Trying to survive. Doctors ruled the first 5 deaths as hypothermia. Freezing. But the scene made no sense. Why leave the tent? Why remove clothing? Why not return immediately? There were no signs of a large avalanche. No evidence of an attack. No gunshots. No animal tracks. Just silence. And snow. Then, Weeks later, when the snow began to melt, searchers would uncover something far more disturbing, because the remaining 4 bodies were not lying in the open. They were buried, hidden beneath meters of snow, in a ravine, and their injuries would turn a tragic accident into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in modern history.
The ravine. It was May 1959. Nearly 3 months after the hikers disappeared, the snow in the northern Urals began to melt, revealing what winter had hidden. Search teams returned to the forest, probing deeper into a nearby ravine. That's when they found them, the final 4 members of the Dyatlov group. Unlike the others, these bodies were not lying exposed on the surface. They were buried under more than 3 meters of snow inside a natural ravine. It appeared they had tried to build a shelter. Branches were cut, snow walls partially formed, clothing pieces carefully arranged. It looked like a desperate attempt to survive the night, but what investigators saw next changed everything. The injuries were not like the others. One hiker had a massive skull fracture. Another had severe chest compression, so powerful that doctors later compared it to the force of a car crash. Yet strangely, there were no external wounds, no deep cuts, no visible trauma matching that level of damage. It was as if something had crushed them with immense force, without leaving marks on the skin. And then there was the most disturbing detail of all. One female hiker was missing her tongue and part of her lips. Soft tissue from her face was gone. At first, authorities suggested natural decomposition, scavenger animals, water flow in the ravine. But for families and investigators, the details felt too specific, too unsettling. There was more. Clothing recovered from the bodies showed traces of radiation, not enough to cause immediate alarm, but enough to raise serious questions. Why radiation? None of the hikers worked directly with nuclear materials. The Soviet military was questioned. Rumors began to spread. Secret weapons testing, military parachute mines, experimental explosives, but nothing was officially confirmed. The case quickly became classified. Investigators concluded that the hikers died due to an unknown compelling force. That was the exact wording. Not avalanche, not attack, not storm. Just an unknown force. The case files were sealed. Families were given limited information. Media coverage faded, but the questions never disappeared. What caused experienced hikers to cut open their own tent and walk into lethal cold? What delivered crushing internal injuries without visible external damage? Why were some attempting to return while others built a shelter? And why radiation? Over the decades, theories multiplied. Avalanche, infrasound-induced panic, military weapons testing, secret Soviet experiments, even extraterrestrial involvement. Each explanation solved part of the puzzle, but never all of it. The Dyatlov Pass incident became one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries of the 20th century, and the mountain remained silent, as if it had swallowed the truth. But decades later, modern scientists would reopen the case and attempt to finally answer what happened that night on the Mountain of the Dead. The theories. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass case remained frozen in time. Files sealed, rumors spreading, speculation growing. But in the 2000s, modern investigators reopened the mystery. They wanted science to speak where fear once ruled. The first major theory was avalanche. At first, this seemed unlikely. Early search teams reported no clear signs of a massive avalanche. The tent was still partially standing. Footprints were visible. But in 2020, scientists revisited the case using advanced computer simulations. They proposed a delayed slab avalanche. A small but powerful snow slab could have formed above the tent, not large enough to bury everything, but heavy enough to partially collapse the structure. Imagine being inside that tent. Suddenly, the snow above shifts, the weight presses down, the support poles bend, the fabric tightens around you. In darkness, in freezing wind, in panic, you might think a full avalanche is seconds away. Instead of struggling with the frozen entrance, cutting the tent open would be the fastest escape. This could explain why they left quickly, but it doesn't explain everything. Why walk calmly? Why move nearly a mile away? Why the crushing internal injuries? Another theory focused on infrasound. Certain wind patterns over mountain slopes can create low-frequency sound waves. Humans can't hear them, but we can feel them. Some researchers suggest these sound waves may cause intense anxiety, irrational fear, even sudden panic. If powerful enough, it could have triggered a fight or flight response. Imagine your heart racing, your mind overwhelmed with terror, no visible threat, just overwhelming fear. Would you stay inside a tent, or would you escape immediately? Again, it explains panic, but not broken ribs, like a car accident. Then came the military theory. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union tested experimental weapons, parachute mines, explosives that detonated above the ground, sending shockwaves downward. A shockwave could cause severe internal injuries without leaving visible external wounds. It could also explain the radiation traces. Some witnesses in neighboring villages reported seeing strange orange lights in the sky that night. Flares, military tests, or something else. But no official records confirm such operations in that exact location. The Soviet government maintained there was no military involvement. Over time, some investigators suggested a combination of factors: a small avalanche, cold exposure, desperation, poor decisions under stress. Once outside, hypothermia begins to alter thinking. In extreme cold, the human brain starts to malfunction. Victims may feel sudden warmth. They may remove clothing, a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing. This could explain why some hikers were found nearly naked. As hypothermia deepens, coordination fades, judgment collapses, group dynamics change, leaders weaken, panic spreads. What started as a single frightening event could have turned into cascading survival failure. One decision after another, each slightly wrong, until it was too late. In 2020, Russian authorities officially concluded that an avalanche was the most likely cause. Case closed. But for many, the mystery still feels unfinished, because no theory perfectly explains every detail. The missing tongue, the radiation, the strange lights, the internal injuries. The mountain kept its silence, and perhaps it always will. But there is one final question that lingers. If you were inside that tent, would you have stayed? Or would you have cut your way out into the darkness?
The mountain keeps its secrets. More than 60 years have passed. The snow has fallen and melted thousands of times on the slopes of Kolatsiak. But the story of the 9 hikers has never faded. Why? Because the Dyatlov Pass incident is not just about death. It is about fear. It is about that single moment when something feels wrong, and you must decide whether to stay or to run. 9 strong, experienced hikers. Not amateurs, not reckless thrill seekers. They were trained, disciplined, prepared. And yet, in the middle of the night, in brutal, freezing cold, they cut open their only shelter and stepped into darkness. That decision is what haunts people. Not the injuries, not the missing tongue, not even the radiation. It's the choice. What could make rational people abandon safety for certain death? Modern science offers answers. Avalanche pressure, wind-generated infrasound, hypothermia confusion, shockwave trauma. Each explanation sounds logical. Each fills part of the gap. But deep down, humans don't just want logic. We want certainty. We want to believe that if we were there, we would make the right decision, that we would stay calm, that we would survive. But survival in extreme conditions is rarely about strength. It is about seconds. Seconds of confusion, seconds of fear, seconds of misjudgment. In -30 degrees, those seconds become fatal. The hikers tried to adapt. 2 climbed a cedar tree, perhaps to look for danger, or to see if the tent was still visible. Some attempted to return. 4 built a snow shelter, trying to outlast the cold. They fought. They made choices. They tried to live. And yet, the mountain won. Today, Dyatlov Pass has become a place of pilgrimage. Hikers visit. Documentarians investigate. Theories continue to circulate online. But the wind still blows the same way. The snow still falls silently. And the slope still looks ordinary. Maybe that's what makes this story so powerful. There was no monster, no dramatic explosion, no cinematic villain. Just nature. Cold, pressure, darkness, and human vulnerability. In 2020, officials declared the mystery solved. An avalanche. Case closed. But some questions remain in the quiet spaces between facts. Because sometimes, even when science gives us an answer, the human mind still whispers, "What if?"